Hey, what's up everyone? So I just finished watching Squid Game, and I was going through Twitter, and a lot of people kind of want Squid Game into Dead by Daylight, but a lot of people also don't, and I can see why. It's not really a horror movie, but I'm here to think about, like, can Squid Game become a chapter in Dead by Daylight? What my initial thoughts are of the show, and how would it work in Dead by Daylight? Now, first off, the show was phenomenal. Like, it was amazing. But if you haven't seen it, I might go into some mild spoilers in this video. I'm not too sure. But I just want you to know, anyone that hasn't seen it, watch it. Amazing show. But the real question is, how could Squid Game work in Dead by Daylight? Because there isn't really a known killer. There's not one specific killer. But they could do a lot of things to make it so it could still work, in which it could be, there's actually a number of things they could do. First off, they could do just a licensed paragraph where it's just a survivor, and they have an ample amount of choices. I think the most obvious choice is Tiong Ji-hun. I'm probably saying his name wrong, because I'm sorry, I'm just bad. But I think he would work amazingly as a chapter, but there's actually someone else that I want to talk about, which is basically the other character that is kind of like the number 2. But people might not want him because of, you know, what happened. I'm gonna get into some spoilers, actually. Here's a spoiler warning. Cho Sang-woo. I'm sorry if I butchered it or if I'm saying it wrong, but I'm bad with names. But basically, he kind of became a bad guy in quotation marks at the end, where he kind of was doing some bad things for his own purpose. But here's the thing about that. That's kind of what a lot of survivors in Dead by Daylight do. Some of them actually kill people just so they could, like, get ahead in life. Like, I know some of them did by accident. Like, I know Nia killed someone by accident, but I'm not gonna try to get into it that much. There's a lot of survivors in Dead by Daylight that's done some pretty bad things. So those two are really good options. Those both have really, you know, like, dramatic things that happen to them in life, things that would work in Dead by Daylight, in which they kind of started off, you know, as bad people, and then, like, kind of grew from that. One of them actually died. Like, one of them died. Like, you know, the other guy died. Spoilers, which you already know. He would work very well in Dead by Daylight. I could see his perks being like perks that only help him, in which, like, you know, perks that, like, look at Yunjin Lee. One of her perks basically is like a perk only for her, in which you kind of need the other survivors to do badly for it to work, in which a survivor gets hooked and then she gains like 3 tokens or whatever to for gens. That perks like that would work perfectly for Cho Sang-woo. Sorry for saying his name wrong if I have, but yeah, I think it would work perfectly. But obviously, I don't know, it could be either or, and we don't really need a killer. But honestly, we don't really need a killer, that's the thing. These two would bring in very unique perks. They both would bring in some pretty cool things, and they both have some pretty cool lore. I won't get into it that much because I don't want to get into major spoilers, even though I kind of already have, but oh well. But let's talk about who a potential killer could be. Now, I can think of 3. One is like the obvious choice. It's, you know, any of the worker guys. You know, the guy that's in pink or whatever the color that was. You know, the guys that are, you know, wearing the mask. They could be killers. The problem is that they always use guns, which I highly doubt that if they ever get added, they would be using guns. But there are times where they would actually use like a knife or some weapon. But that's kind of irrelevant right now. It's just how would a power work? Because it could easily. There are instances where they actually don't use the gun, so they could just use that weapon in the game. But what could their power be? Well, the whole point of the the show is that they're doing like a challenge, or they're playing a game and they have to do it flawlessly or they die. Now, I think a power could be where like a passive power could be where survivors have to do a generator, or survivors have to do objectives, and if they mess it up somehow, like for instance, if they fail a skill check, they automatically go into the injured state or the down state. I don't know. I think the down state would be kind of OP, but at the same time, most people don't fail skill checks. I don't really know what else they could do with the power besides like just maybe giving. They could give extra objectives, which would kind of waste time for the survivor because they kind of need to do gens. And if they fail those objectives, then obviously they'll die or get downed in this case. But like, what would make them want to do those objectives? I don't know. If they don't do it in time, then everyone dies or something, or everyone goes into the injured state, or everyone goes into the down state immediately. That would kind of be OP, but obviously the devs can tinker with it. But if they don't want to do a killer, they could easily do cosmetics for like an existing killer. For instance, the Legion. I think that would fit the Legion perfectly. Just give him a new weapon, give him an Inkpin, and like put him in the whole outfit. I think that would work just fine. Well, there's also one more thing they could do, in which they do the same thing they did with Ghostface, in which they only partially got the license, but they use that like the mask and create their own story. Because if they do add like one of those worker guys into the game, like there's no specific one that stands out in my opinion that could work as a killer. So what they could do is make a backstory for one of them, or honestly they don't have to. They could just do it like what they did for like Nemesis, in which they just say like they write a paragraph saying, oh, this guy worked for some guy, and then blah blah blah. Obviously this is kind of like a Jigsaw situation where they can't use like the big bad of the show because they're too old. I'm not gonna say who it is specifically because spoilers, but there's like a guy that is kind of the big bad, but they don't really do anything, like in terms of chases. There are scenes in the game where there's actually kind of like, they're kind of chasing someone, so it kind of works. I don't want to like, spoil anything, but I kind of already am, so I already warned spoilers. But yeah, I think the most likely thing they'll do is do just like a licensed survivor. Because the thing with Dead by Daylight that I still kind of disagree with this, that people are saying the reason that Squid Game doesn't work Dead by Daylight is because it's not scary. Now personally, I think that the workers are actually probably the scariest characters of the show. I'm not saying like, oh, I got scared, I was actually like, literally scared of him. I was like, oh no, like, I wasn't like scared of him or anything. I wasn't like screaming when I watched them. But they are scary in the way that anybody could be behind a mask. It could be any person. The workers are probably scarier than even like the big bad of the show, because literally it could be anyone. There's a scene in the show where they're like, oh, you're so young, and then he kills himself because it's like he's kind of like mentally scarred that some young guy that probably made a mistake is kind of stuck doing this job of being this this murderer pretty much. And these guys kind of like, they aren't allowed to talk, which let's work for Dead by Daylight to add voice lines, by the way. But yeah, a killer that doesn't talk is it's scarier than a killer that does talk, which is why Dead by Daylight made most of the killers don't like not talk at all, because it makes them scarier. And that's kind of like one of the things about the workers. They hardly ever talk, and they basically just shoot you or they stab you or whatever, like whatever. Yeah. And using that, I think that's a perfect reason to add them to Dead by Daylight. I just don't get why people don't think that's scary. Obviously, it's not like jump scare scary, but it is scary. It's unnerving to know that these guys aren't really monsters. They're humans wearing a mask. Because a lot of times in the show, they're like calling these workers monsters or whatever, and they always ask them to take the mask off. And when they do, they're kind of scarred by that. Like one of the guys literally killed himself because he realized that one of the workers was literally basically just a kid in a way. He wasn't that old. Like Dead by Daylight always makes the killers scary in one way, like in which the Elysian isn't really scary, but like the concept is that they're scary because they're just kids, under a mask, and that's kind of scary because that means kind of anyone can be under that mask at that point. And they're not just like these monsters, like freaking the Shape, for instance, is basically like the human embodiment of evil. He's basically not even human, but he is human. But like the Legion is probably the perfect example. But so is Trickster, because Trickster's really just some guy. He doesn't even wear a mask, but it is scarier when they do wear a mask because it kind of removes that human aspect of them. And like when they take the mask off, they're still like that. They don't like change, and they just follow orders and kill. Which personally I think is pretty scary in a way. That's why I think that they work, or at least it could. The point is that Squid Game can 100% work in Dead by Daylight. A lot of people disagree with that, but I think they're wrong. The survivors work really well. Like, killer aside, survivors alone, if they're too lazy to make a killer, they could just do a skin or something, like for like the Legion or any masked killer, to be honest. But the survivors 100% work, without a doubt. They are literally the most. These survivors are really unique in a way because they're not like great people, which a lot of survivors in Dead by Daylight aren't great people, which is kind of why the Entity chose them. So the Entity would definitely choose some of these survivors because they all come from like a dark past, or like most of them do, and not a lot of them aren't good people. So they kind of work perfectly in Dead by Daylight. But without going on and on and on, I'm gonna end it here. The point was that I think Squid Game works with Dead by Daylight. Whether Netflix lets them do it, I don't know. That wasn't the point. If I think they will, or if Dead by Daylight even gives a crap, I don't know. I'm sure they thought about it because right now everyone's talking about Squid Game. I think they could do it somehow, but will they do it? I don't know, but I think they should. I think it works. They don't need to get a killer, so yeah, like I said, they don't need a killer. I know a lot of people don't want a killer. They don't need to do that. They can just do a survivor. Like I'm not asking for a killer. But if they get the license, they might as well get it like a skin or something for the killer. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.